Eve Ramos knelt beside the hydrangeas on a humid July morning when a dark sports car tore across the perfect lawn, shaking the ground beneath her knees. The engine shrieked as it stopped, and a young man stepped out snapping his fingers like she was invisible. His name was Caleb Ashford, the spoiled grandson who believed the estate already belonged to him. "You there!" "Snap, snap!" he barked, waving at her like she was a stray leaf. Eve stood slowly, wiping her muddy hands, lowering her eyes just enough for him to feel superior. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, letting him believe she was only the gardener. Caleb kicked a chunk of soil aside and pointed at the trunk of his car. "Get my bags and take them to the top suite. Use the back door. No mud in the foyer." Eve kept her voice calm. "Sir, the luggage staff normally handles that." Caleb stepped closer, smelling of cologne and impatience. "I fired them. Too slow. So you'll do it. And fix that weed over there." He pointed at a rare yellow flower. Eve bowed her head slightly. "Of course, sir." She followed orders because every second was being recorded. Back in her small office, Eve opened the black leather ledger hidden beneath old seed catalogs. She wrote calmly, 10:14 a.m. vehicle damage. Verbal abuse. Threat of termination. Her handwriting was clean, precise, unshaken. Caleb believed she was a simple gardener, but she was actually the secret co-trustee, appointed years ago by Gregory Ashford. She opened the thick rulebook and touched the clause protecting long-time staff from sudden firing. "He doesn't know the trap he's walking into," she whispered, closing the binder with quiet certainty. The next morning, black SUVs arrived carrying trendy consultants with tablets and loud opinions. Caleb strutted beside them, waving his arms. "We're modernizing everything," he bragged. Eve stood in the doorway as they slapped neon LED strips onto priceless wood paneling. "Sir, they must sign liability forms," she said softly. Caleb groaned and signed without reading a word. She tucked the document away like a jewel. When the men pried bronze plaques off the wall, she sent a quiet message to the estate lawyer. "Let him continue," the lawyer replied. Eve smiled faintly. Caleb replaced licensed electricians with 3 careless friends who barely knew how tools worked. Eve gave them a safety clipboard, and they signed without reading it. At lunch, the chef served a beautiful meal, but Caleb shoved it away. "Museum food," he sneered, ordering greasy fast food instead. Eve told the chef gently, "Log everything he wasted." Later, when Caleb kicked a door sensor and broke it, Eve photographed the damage. Every mistake he made became evidence. "Keep going, Caleb," she whispered. "You're building the case yourself." By the end of the day, Caleb demanded new furniture, new lights, and new studio equipment. Eve processed every order one by one, watching the budget meter rise until it crossed the red line. The system blinked, automatic audit triggered. She closed her laptop calmly. From the terrace, she heard Caleb shouting into his phone, bragging about turning the estate into a streaming empire. Eve whispered, "You're spending faster than the trust can breathe." The trap was now fully active. The next morning, Caleb marched toward the locked server room with 2 of his college friends. "Move aside," he ordered the security chief, Hank. "We're checking the equipment." Hank stood firm. "Sir, no one enters without trustee clearance." Caleb's face turned red. "I am the clearance. Open it or you're fired." Hank met Eve's eyes briefly, then walked away without resistance. Eve opened her ledger and wrote, "Unlawful termination of legacy staff." She whispered, "Another line in the file." Caleb stormed into Eve's office waving his phone. "Why can't I transfer money? Why do I need your approval?" Eve spoke gently. "Large transfers need 2 signatures, sir. It's policy." "Remove it," he shouted. "I want full control." She typed an email in front of him, "Per your request, remove all fraud safeguards." He didn't even look at it. He just said, "Good." Eve copied the estate lawyer and hit send. She watched another domino fall. Later that afternoon, a slick man in a shiny suit arrived. Caleb smiled proudly. "This is Mark. He's helping me unlock liquidity." Eve checked the system and saw dozens of red flags, predatory loans, lawsuits, fraud claims. She quietly redirected their meeting into the library, where the audio system recorded everything. From her desk, she listened as Caleb whispered, No one will know. I'll use the art as collateral. Eve saved the recording as evidence. Thank you, Caleb, she murmured. That night, while Caleb drank expensive scotch on the terrace, he waved Eve over. Pour me another, he ordered. She obeyed, phone recording quietly from her pocket. My grandfather trapped this place in the past, he grumbled. I might tear down his statue, replace it with a neon logo. Eve said softly, Mr. Gregory built the trust to protect the land. Caleb laughed. I'm the warden now. Eve walked away, whispering, not for long. Eve returned to her office and studied the financial dashboard glowing red across the screen. Caleb's reckless spending had pushed the system into full audit mode, and the trust's algorithms were already assembling a report. Outside, the party noise from the Heritage Hall vibrated through the windows like distant thunder. She watched the cameras as strangers spilled wine on priceless carpets and leaned against antique wood. He thinks this is freedom, she whispered. But he's only pulling the ropes tighter around himself. She saved every image for the board. By evening, the hall looked like a nightclub rather than a historic home. People danced on Louis XIV chairs, dropped cigarette ash into indoor palms, and smeared greasy fingerprints across framed oil paintings. Caleb climbed onto a coffee table with a microphone, shouting about rebranding and selling naming rights. Eve stood in the shadows, recording the madness as neon lights flashed purple across the ancestors' portraits. A young woman complained that a bronze statue ruined her selfie, and Caleb grabbed a silver marker. He signed his name across the art. Eve whispered, that will seal your fate. She stepped into the hall long enough to gather a witness. Sarah, she whispered, did you see him draw on the statue? Sarah nodded nervously. He ruined it, Ms. Eve. Everyone saw. Eve handed her a small incident card. Sign here. Just what you saw, nothing more. Sarah signed with shaking hands, sealing the testimony. Eve returned to the terrace as Caleb drank straight from a champagne bottle, laughing without control. She typed into her ledger, intentional vandalism of protected property. She looked at the estate and whispered, the house will remember this. When midnight arrived, Eve adjusted the maintenance schedule on her tablet. She moved the leaf blower crew to 6 a.m. and instructed the irrigation team to test the high-pressure sprinklers near Caleb's windows. He hates noise, she murmured, and tomorrow he'll wake up to a storm he created. She looked at the battered hall on the monitor as guests stumbled out and music slowly died. The estate seemed to sigh with exhaustion, waiting for dawn. Eve shut down her screen and whispered to the dark room, by tomorrow, he'll show the board who he truly is. At sunrise, 4 industrial blowers roared to life beneath Caleb's window. He stumbled out pale and furious, shouting words swallowed by noise. Eve watched calmly from the hedge, her hands behind her back. By 9, Caleb dragged himself onto the terrace where 2 investors waited, Mr. Stone and Ms. Lee, the auditors disguised as business partners. Eve held blueprints as Caleb pointed across the wetlands. We'll pave it. Helipad here. Glamping pods over there. Ms. Lee frowned. Is this land zoned for construction? Caleb waved dismissively. Sure. Clean as new paper. Eve prepared to speak. Eve unrolled the blueprint on the table. Actually, sir, she said softly, this is protected wetland. Permanent restriction. No paving, no structures. Ms. Lee's expression hardened. Mr. Stone closed his folder. You misrepresented the project, he said coolly. Caleb stuttered. No, she's wrong. She's just the gardener. Ms. Lee turned away. This site is a legal trap. We're done. Their rejection cut deeper than any insult. Caleb's face twisted with humiliation as they headed for their car. Eve stepped back, waiting for the explosion she knew would come. Caleb grabbed a crystal glass and hurled it at Eve's feet. It shattered across the stone, water splashing her boots. You ruined everything, he screamed, stepping close enough for her to feel his breath. You sabotage me. You think you're smarter than me? You're nothing. Eve kept her voice calm and steady. Sir, I only answered a zoning question. Shut up, he roared. You're fired. Fired right now. Eve lifted her head. Are you formally terminating me without the board? Yes, he shouted. She whispered, thank you. Eve dialed the estate lawyer and placed the phone on speaker. "Mr. Price," she said, "Mr. Caleb Ashford has issued a public termination of the steward without cause." The lawyer's voice came sharp. "Timestamp accepted. Executive privileges suspended immediately." Caleb blinked in confusion. "What? What is he talking about? Suspend what?" Eve watched his phone buzz as access codes failed and banking alerts flashed red. "Your accounts," she said softly, "belong to the trust, not you. And the trust responds to violations." Caleb grabbed his phone, panicking as each app locked him out. The police dispatcher refused his trespass complaint, explaining that Eve was the legal representative of the property. Moments later, Mr. Price arrived with a thick file. Caleb ran to him. "Thank God. Fix this. She's taken everything." Mr. Price opened the binder, revealing Eve's trusteeship papers. "She didn't take anything, Caleb. She was given responsibility years ago. You fired the one person you had no right to fire." Caleb stared at Eve as if seeing her for the first time. "Your trustee." Eve answered quietly, "I'm the steward you ignored." 2 days later, in the boardroom, Eve presented the photos, recordings, and logs. "Exhibit A," she said, sliding vandalism images forward. "Exhibit B, unauthorized firing. Exhibit C, attempted loan fraud." Caleb shouted, "This is entrapment." Judge Holloway silenced him with a glare. "This is evidence." Then came the audio of Caleb planning to mortgage the art collection. His own voice filled the room. "No one has to know. We'll flip this place." When the playback ended, silence fell heavy across the table. Eve closed the binder gently. The trust cannot survive under him. When the evidence ended, Caleb jumped to his feet. "I'll sue all of you," he shouted, pointing wildly around the room. But the board members looked calm, almost tired. Mr. Stone spoke first from the speakerphone. "Your reactions during our assessment confirmed every concern." Ms. Lee added, "You ignored law, safety, and truth." Judge Holloway tapped the table once. "The board votes now." One by one, hands rose. When Eve raised hers, Caleb sagged. His last support had fallen away. Judge Holloway read the decision aloud. "Caleb Ashford, you are stripped of financial authority and removed from the primary residence." Caleb choked out a laugh. "Removed? From my own house?" Eve answered softly, "It never belonged to you. It belonged to the trust." He stared at her with fury and fear tangled together. "I don't even get the house?" Judge Holloway shook his head. "You may reside in the gatehouse during probation. If you show no improvement, you will be removed from the trust entirely." Silence hit him harder than any punishment. Caleb stormed from the meeting, dragging his high-priced lawyer behind him. But before he reached the door, 2 police officers stepped inside. Their presence froze everyone. The detective announced, "Caleb Ashford, we have a warrant for your arrest regarding attempted loan fraud." Caleb stumbled backward. "Fraud? I didn't do anything. I just signed what he gave me." The detective held up the contract. "You signed a confession of judgment on assets you did not own." Eve watched as Caleb's lawyer quietly backed away, already abandoning the sinking ship. The handcuffs clicked around Caleb's wrists, echoing sharply through the library. His eyes darted toward Eve, wide and terrified. "Please," he begged, "Eve, tell them it was a mistake." She didn't move. "I warned you through your actions," she said calmly. The officers guided him out as he kept twisting to look back. Through the tall windows, Eve watched the patrol car roll down the driveway. The estate, once loud with his bragging, now breathed in quiet relief. The storm had finally broken. After the meeting, Eve walked across the lawn, feeling the weight of 8 years lift slowly from her shoulders. She entered the equipment shed, hung her blazer, and pulled on her work vest. The smell of soil and fresh-cut grass greeted her like an old friend. She picked up her pruning shears, the same ones Caleb had ignored. "Back to work," she whispered. Outside, birds hopped across the damaged patches of lawn where his tires had once carved deep scars. The roots were still alive. Just like the house. That night, the internet exploded with Caleb's videos from the gatehouse, calling himself a victim. "She stole my home," he cried, rehearsing tears. A gardener tricked my grandfather. But Eve already had the counterweight. She sent the editorial board the recording of Caleb laughing as he scribbled his signature on the liability form. I don't read fine print. That's for poor people. The reaction was instant. Articles shifted tone. Headlines softened. Outrage faded. Caleb's story cracked in the daylight of his own words. Yet Caleb grew desperate. A storm rolled over the Hudson Valley, lightning splitting the sky. At 2 a.m, Eve's phone blared an alert, massive pressure drop in the garden irrigation line. She rushed through the rain to find the valve box pried open. Inside, the pipe wasn't burst, it was sawed. Mud flowed across the path like a wounded river. She shut the master valve, soaked and silent. Sabotage, she whispered. He was trying to force a disaster to blame on her. Inside the electrical shed, Eve checked the keypad logs. The override code had been used at 1:30 a.m., a code stored only in the gatehouse emergency binder. Motion detectors confirmed a single heat path from the cottage to the valve box and back. Eve documented everything without anger. When someone is drowning, she murmured, they pull others down. She opened her binder and logged the evidence. The story was no longer about control. It was about protecting the estate from a frightened boy with no boundaries. Early the next morning, Eve spotted Leo, a seasonal worker, near the maintenance shed. Caleb emerged from the bushes, whispering urgently as he pressed an envelope of cash into the young man's hand. Leo looked startled. He walked straight to Eve and held it out. He wants my master badge, Leo said. He said he just needs his laptop charger, but he's not right, Ms. Eve. She placed a hand on his shoulder. You did well, Leo. Keep the money. I'll handle the rest. She gave him a deactivated badge to pass along. Minutes later, the security system flashed, unauthorized access attempt. The cameras showed Caleb slamming the fake card against the east door, cursing as the lock refused him. Eve watched from her office without emotion. He's fighting shadows now, she whispered. When the board met that afternoon, she presented the sabotage photos, the motion logs, and Leo's testimony. Judge Holloway sighed. This is no longer immaturity. This is danger. Eve nodded. We must give him one final chance, only one. The board agreed to a last review meeting. Eve waited by the fountain as the sun dropped behind the trees. Caleb approached slowly from the gatehouse, shoulders sagging, clothes wrinkled. For the first time, he looked less like an heir and more like a lost boy. He stopped several steps away. You won, he said, voice cracked. She didn't answer. He swallowed hard. I'll stop fighting. I'll let you handle everything. Just give me back access. Please. Eve stepped forward quietly. Words won't save the house, Caleb. Work will. She reached into her bag and placed a pair of pruning shears on the wall between them. The ivy on the north wall is killing the stone. Cut it back by hand. 3 days of real work. Caleb stared at the shears like they were foreign tools. You want me to trim plants? Eve nodded gently. Show the board you can care for something other than yourself. She walked away, leaving him frozen in place. Over the next days, the shears remained untouched, still shining, still waiting for a change that never came. On the morning of the final review, Eve checked the north wall again. The ivy was thicker, heavier, untouched by any hand but nature's. She sighed. He made his choice. When she arrived at the library, Caleb was already inside wearing a sharp navy suit. His new lawyer, Mr. Kincaid, stood beside him with a thick stack of papers. Caleb lifted his chin and smirked. We're filing for damages. 10 million. And a gag order. Eve simply took her seat. She'd seen men hide behind suits before. Mr. Kincaid announced loudly, my client was trapped, manipulated, and publicly humiliated by this woman. Judge Holloway raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Eve folded her hands. If I may judge, she said calmly. She tapped her tablet. The screen lit up, showing Caleb on video laughing as he scribbled his signature onto the liability form. I don't read fine print, he bragged. That's for poor people. Mr. Kincaid's smile wilted. Silence filled the room like cold smoke. Eve waited for the next card to fall. Eve played the second recording, the one from the vandalism. Caleb stood in neon light, marker in hand, writing across the bronze statue. "I'll fix it. Make it modern." Gasps spread around the room. Then she played the audio from his meeting with the loan shark, Mark. "We'll use the art as collateral," Caleb whispered on the tape. "No one will know." Judge Holloway leaned back slowly. "This is not entrapment," he said. "This is self-destruction." Caleb gripped the table, breathing fast, his confidence dissolving. Then came the auditors, Mr. Stone and Ms. Lee, joining by speakerphone. "We were never investors," Ms. Lee said. "We were assessing the beneficiary's judgment." Mr. Stone added, "He failed each test, legal, financial, and ethical." Caleb slammed his fist on the table. "You tricked me. All of you." Judge Holloway tapped his pen once. "Son, a competent leader cannot be tricked this easily." Eve closed her binder. The room felt ready to deliver its final verdict. The trust had run out of patience long before today. Judge Holloway stood. "By unanimous vote, Caleb Ashford is hereby removed as beneficiary of the Ashford Trust." Caleb's mouth fell open. "Removed? Permanently?" The judge nodded. "Effective immediately." Caleb staggered back like he had been struck. "Then who gets the estate?" Eve shook her head gently. "No one. It moves to the charitable branch, just as Gregory wanted, unless the heir proves worthy." Caleb's glare twisted. "You think you're so perfect." Eve answered softly, "No. I just respect what I protect." Before Caleb could speak again, 2 police officers entered the library. The detective stepped forward holding a warrant. "Caleb Ashford, you are under arrest for attempted loan fraud." Caleb froze. "Not again, no, please, this is my family's house." The detective shook his head. "You tried to mortgage art you didn't own. That's a felony." His lawyer backed away, refusing to risk his own reputation. The handcuffs clicked shut. Caleb looked at Eve, eyes wide with helpless panic. "Eve, please," she didn't move. The officers escorted Caleb down the hallway, past the portraits of ancestors he never honored. Through the tall windows, Eve watched the patrol car rolling down the long driveway. No anger rose inside her, only the quiet relief of someone who had protected something fragile and important. She walked out to the lawn, feeling the calm return to the estate like a long-awaited breath. "This house survived storms before," she whispered. "It will outlive this one too." The sun broke through the clouds, warm and bright over the fields. Eve returned to the equipment shed, hung her blazer back on the hook, and put on her familiar work vest. She picked up the pruning shears and stepped into the morning air. The lawn that Caleb had scarred with his car was healing, green returning, roots holding strong. Kneeling in the grass, she trimmed the damaged blades with steady hands. "Power isn't noise," she murmured. "It's the choice of what grows and what gets cut." The sprinklers clicked on, spraying arcs of water across the estate. The garden lived on, and the steward continued her quiet watch.